During Christmas dinner, while the family was exchanging presents, my daughter Mary handed me a thick envelope with the words, "You'll like this." I opened it, and inside was her husband Daniel's debt for $250,000. "The money is needed before New Year's," she said. I smiled and said, "Of course." But a plan for revenge was already forming in my head. When my daughter returned for the money, that man was standing next to me, and when she saw him, she screamed in horror. Before continuing, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Christmas carols floated through my New York City home as I settled into my favorite armchair, watching my family gather around the tree. The warm glow of the lights reflected off the scattered wrapping paper, creating the perfect Christmas Eve that I'd been looking forward to all week. Matthew was sitting cross-legged on the floor, still tearing at his presents with the enthusiasm of a 16-year-old. "Grandpa, you have one more gift coming," Mary announced, with a smile that was too bright as she approached with an envelope. Something in her tone made me put down my coffee mug. "You're going to love this, Dad." The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Official. It wasn't the usual weight of a Christmas card. Daniel shifted uncomfortably on the couch, avoiding my gaze entirely. After 35 years of reading people in business negotiations, I recognized the signs of someone hiding something important. "This is no ordinary gift," Mary continued, sitting on the arm of my chair. "You'll love it because it can help your family." The papers inside were not greeting cards. Investment documents, loan agreements, numbers that made my vision blur for a moment. $250,000. Daniel's signature was scattered across multiple pages, along with names I didn't recognize. Official letterheads from private investment firms. 250,000. The words came out lower than I intended. "That's quite specific." Mary's confidence wavered slightly, but she pushed ahead. "Daniel got into trouble. An investor will sue him if he doesn't pay the money back. We've been hiding for a month." The lights on the Christmas tree suddenly seemed too bright. I could hear Matthew's excited chatter fade as I felt the shift in the atmosphere. Daniel finally looked up, his face pale and haggard. How long had they been planning this moment? How long had they been waiting for the perfect opportunity to corner me, hiding for a month? "A month," I repeated, letting the weight of those words settle. They had known about this debt since before the big family dinner. Before our family dinner last week. Before every phone call where Mary asked about my health, my business, my Christmas plans. "Could you have asked instead of demanded?" My voice carried the chill I had perfected in business negotiations gone wrong. Mary straightened up, her smile growing more forced. "Dad, don't be difficult. This is family. We help each other, right?" The envelope crinkled when I placed it on the side table. Daniel opened his mouth as if to speak, and then closed it again. The silence stretched until the sounds of Matthew unwrapping gifts seemed deafening. My grandson looked between his parents and me, confused by the sudden tension. "By New Year's," Mary added, as if the deadline made the demand more reasonable. "We need it by New Year's, or the lawsuit will begin." I studied my daughter's face, searching for any sign of the little girl who used to climb into this very chair for bedtime stories. Instead, I saw calculation, entitlement, the assumption that my money was automatically hers when they needed it. "Absolutely," I finally said, watching relief flood Mary's features. "I will certainly think about it." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, already moving toward Daniel with satisfied confidence. "I knew you would understand, Dad. Family takes care of family." But as she walked away, she didn't see the cold smile that touched my lips. Oh, I understood perfectly. And indeed, I would think about it very carefully. The relief in Mary's eyes lasted exactly as long as it took me to rise from my chair. Something in my movement, or perhaps the silence that followed my acceptance, made her stop near the tree. "For 35 years I raised you to respect people," I said, my voice carrying the authority that had built 3 successful car dealerships. "And you come into my house on Christmas with an ultimatum." "What?" Mary turned, her confident expression cracking. "Dad, what are you talking about? I'm asking for help." "Asking?" I picked up the envelope, letting the papers spill onto my lap. "This is not a request, Mary. This is a business presentation, complete with documentation, deadlines, and consequences." Daniel finally found his voice. "Mr. Smith, my implied last name. I know this looks bad, but the startup needed additional investment to reach the next round of funding. The projection showed..." "Stop!" I raised a hand, never taking my eyes off my daughter. "You lost someone else's money in your failed project, and now you're hiding behind my daughter?" Mary's face flushed. "Don't be dramatic. This is family. We should help each other. You have more money than you could ever spend." "That is not the point." My voice grew colder with every word. "The point is that you have spent a month planning this ambush. You have been calling me, pretending to care about my health, my Christmas plans, my loneliness since your mother died, all while calculating the perfect moment to corner me." Matthew quietly set down his remaining gifts and slipped out of the room. Smart kid. He could sense when adult conversations turned ugly. "I do care about you." Mary's voice rose, her gestures becoming more dramatic. "But Daniel needs help, and you are being selfish." "Selfish?" The word hung in the air like a challenge. "I've given you everything. College tuition, down payment on your house, seed capital for Daniel's first venture. How much of my selfishness have you enjoyed over the years?" Daniel leaned forward on the couch, desperation seeping into his voice. "Sir, the AI startup had real potential. The market study showed huge growth potential in automated customer service solutions. We just needed more runway to attract the Series A investors." "Runway?" I repeated the startup jargon with distaste. "Is that what you call gambling with other people's money? How many investors did you sweet-talk with your projections and potential?" "It wasn't a gamble." Daniel's voice cracked. "The technology was solid. We had early adopters showing interest. The timing was just..." I moved closer to him. "When exactly did you realize you were in over your head? Before or after taking Victor Reyes' money?" The name hit Daniel like a physical blow. His face went white. "You? You know Victor?" "I know Victor Reyes quite well." I watched comprehension dawn in Daniel's eyes. "Did you think the city business community was small enough that your name wouldn't circulate? Did you imagine I wouldn't find out that my son-in-law was hiding from creditors?" Mary's confidence finally shattered completely. "You knew? You've known this whole time?" "I've known about the debt for 2 weeks. What I didn't know was how you planned to handle it." I gestured toward the scattered papers. "I never imagined you would choose manipulation over honesty." The room was silent, save for the gentle hum of the Christmas lights and the distant sound of clanking plates as Matthew occupied himself in the kitchen. Mary sank onto the couch next to Daniel, her face a mixture of anger and shame. "So now what?" she asked, her voice smaller than before. I looked at both of them, seeing clearly for the first time who they had become. "Now? Now I will think about it, just as I promised." The silence stretched until Mary found her voice again, though it carried a bitter edge I had never heard before. "Fine." She stood up abruptly, smoothing her dress with sharp, furious movements. "I'll be back on December 29th at 4 o'clock. I expect you to be over it, and to have thought it through by then. Her words hit me like a slap. Be over it. As if my reaction to their deceit was somehow unreasonable. As if questioning their methods made me the villain in this scenario. I will think about it, I repeated calmly. I promise. Daniel rose from the couch, his movements uncertain. Mr. Smith, He looked at Mary, then back at me. I never wanted it to happen this way. Goodbye, Daniel. The finality in my voice silenced any apology he might have been preparing. Mary grabbed her purse from the side table. Her movements were sharp and efficient. The careful holiday pretense was over. No more feigning family warmth. Come on, Daniel. She headed toward the front door without looking back. We're done here. I remained standing in the living room, listening to their hurried footsteps in the hallway. The front door opened and closed harder than necessary. Through the window, I watched their car back out of my driveway. The headlights swept across the lawn before disappearing into the city night. The house felt different now. The Christmas decorations seemed somehow ridiculous. Cheerful reminders of the family gathering that had just exploded. I walked slowly toward the dining room. Our abandoned dinner plates were still on the table. Mary's wine glass had a lipstick stain on the rim. Daniel had barely touched his meal, a perfectly roasted turkey with mashed potatoes and stuffing, now cold. I started clearing the table, stacking plates with methodical precision. The familiar rhythm of cleanup helped organize my thoughts. 35 years of fatherhood. And it had come to this, an ultimatum delivered with Christmas wrapping paper still scattered at my feet. Grandpa? Matthew appeared in the doorway. His young face creased with concern. Are they always like that? I paused, holding Mary's half-empty wine glass. Not always, but more often lately. He walked over, helping me collect the silverware. The money they want? It's a lot, right? Is it substantial? Yes. I appreciated his directness. At 16, Matthew often showed more maturity than his parents. How much did you hear? Enough. He folded napkins with careful precision, mimicking my movements. Dad's startup failed, and now they want you to fix it. The simple truth of it hit me. That was exactly what they wanted. Not help, not a loan with terms and conditions. They wanted me to fix Daniel's mistakes and make their problems disappear. Grandpa? Matthew's voice was lower now. What are you going to do? I looked at my grandson, at this young man who had chosen to stay and help clean up instead of disappearing when things got awkward, who asked straight questions instead of beating around the bush. I'm going to think about it very carefully, I said, meaning every word, as we finished clearing the table together, my mind already working. December 29th at 4 o'clock. 4 days to consider their demand. 4 days to decide how to respond to 35 years of raising a daughter who thought love could be bought with ultimatums. The Christmas lights flickered in the living room. But I was no longer seeing holiday decorations. I was seeing possibilities, options, strategies. 4 days was more than enough time to think. And thinking, as any successful businessman knows, was only the first step in a much larger process. Sleep had been elusive. I had sent Matthew home around 10 o'clock at night, promising we would talk more soon. And then I spent hours in my office, looking at the Christmas debt papers spread across my desk. The numbers hadn't changed, but my perspective had crystallized with every passing hour. Dawn was creeping through the blinds as I sat surrounded by the artifacts of my business life. City Chamber of Commerce awards, photos with satisfied customers at my dealerships, the framed $1 bill from my first car sale in 1982. Each memory reminded me of the principles that had built my success. Integrity, accountability, and consequences for bad decisions. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but the legal pad in front of me was covered with notes. Questions that needed answers, connections that needed exploring. The businessman in me had taken over from the hurt father, and that meant approaching the situation like any other complex negotiation. Victor Reyes. The name had haunted Daniel's expression the night before. In the city business community, the Reyes investment group carried weight. I had heard the name at chamber meetings. I had seen it in the business journal. Private equity, hard money loans. The kind of investor who didn't play games with delinquent debtors. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Thomas Green's office. Thomas had been my lawyer for 15 years, handling everything from dealership contracts to my estate planning. If anyone understood legal procedures in the state, it was Thomas. Arthur, Thomas's familiar voice conveyed concern. Everything all right? It's barely 8 in the morning. Thomas, I need information on private debt collection in the state. I kept my voice steady, professional. Specifically, what happens when someone defaults on a private investment loan? A pause. This wouldn't have anything to do with your son-in-law, would it? I heard some rumors around town about a failed startup. The city business community was smaller than most people believed. Of course, Thomas had heard whispers about Daniel's problems. What kind of rumors? Nothing specific. Just that Daniel Herrera got into something over his head with some private investors. Borrowed against projected income that never materialized. Thomas's tone grew more serious. Arthur, tell me you didn't co-sign anything for him. No. I stared at the scattered papers. But he owes $250,000 to someone named Victor Reyes. And yesterday, my daughter handed me the bill as a Christmas gift. The silence on Thomas's end of the line stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. Victor Reyes? Arthur, that man doesn't mess around. He's legitimate. But he expects his money back, on time, with interest. What's his reputation? Fair but ruthless. He'll work with you if you communicate and make good faith efforts. But if you try to hide from him or play games, Thomas's voice trailed off significantly. He has the resources to track down debtors, and the state law is very creditor-friendly. I made more notes on my legal pad. How long does he typically give someone before filing a lawsuit? Depends on the terms of the original agreement, but typically 90 days past the due date. After that, he can pursue garnishments, asset seizures, all legal remedies available. 3 months. Daniel had already been hiding for a month. That left perhaps 8 weeks before Victor Reyes's patience completely ran out. Thomas, I need you to look into something for me. Discreetly. I put down my pen and focused entirely on the conversation. Find out everything you can about the Reyes Investment Group's current legal proceedings, specifically anything involving Daniel Herrera. Arthur, Thomas's voice carried a warning. Whatever you're thinking, be careful. Victor Reyes is not someone you want as an enemy. Who says I want him as an enemy? By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my desk looked like a war room. Thomas's research had arrived via email an hour earlier, confirming what I had suspected. Victor Reyes had already begun preliminary legal proceedings against Daniel. Notices of default, demand letters, the machinery of debt collection was already in motion. My other phone calls had been equally productive. James Stone, my business partner from the early days of building the dealership network, had provided valuable intelligence on Reyes' character and methods. Fair, but ruthless. A man who respected a straight deal, but had 0% tolerance for deception. The sound of my front door opening interrupted my planning. Matthew's voice called from the hallway. Grandpa, you said I could come by this afternoon. In here, Matthew. I quickly gathered the most sensitive documents, sliding them into a folder. My grandson didn't need to see all the details of what I was contemplating. Matthew appeared in the doorway, observing the scattered papers and business cards with curious eyes. "You've been busy. This looks like when you're planning something big for the dealerships." Sharp kid. Too sharp for his own good sometimes. "Sit down, Matthew. I want to ask you something." He settled into the chair across from my desk. His expression was serious. "Is it about Mom and Dad? Is it about right and wrong?" I leaned back, studying his face. "When someone makes a bad decision and hurts other people, what should happen?" Matthew considered the question with the gravity I had come to expect from him. "Should they face the consequences? Fix it somehow, even if fixing it is hard? Even if it means they might be uncomfortable or embarrassed?" "Especially then." His answer came without hesitation. "Otherwise, they'll just keep making bad decisions, right? Because they know someone else will always clean up their mess." Out of the mouths of babes. "And what if the person who usually cleans up the mess decides to stop helping?" Matthew's eyes lit up with understanding. "Then maybe they'll finally learn to be responsible for themselves." He paused, and then added quietly, "Is that what you're planning to do?" I studied my grandson, this 16-year-old, who grasped concepts that seemed to elude his parents. "What would you think if I told you I'm going to help the man your father owes money to find him?" The question hung in the air between us. Matthew's expression moved through surprise, consideration, and finally, something that looked like approval. "You mean, instead of just giving them the money, instead of enabling their irresponsibility?" "Yes." Matthew nodded slowly. "That would teach them something. Giving them money would just teach them that manipulation works. It might be hard on them. Embarrassing, your father might face legal consequences." "Grandpa," Matthew said with remarkable maturity, "sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing." I smiled at him, proud of the young man he was becoming. "Your parents won't see it that way." "My parents see everything through the lens of what's convenient for them." The bitterness in his voice surprised me. "Maybe it's time they learned that actions have consequences." I pulled a business card from the stack on my desk. Victor Reyes's contact information, obtained through my morning research. "I'm calling this man tomorrow. Arranging a meeting." Matthew leaned in to read the card. "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth. That I know where Daniel is hiding. That I believe he should face his responsibilities. And that I'd like to be present when those responsibilities catch up to him. He'll listen to you. Men like Victor Reyes respect other men who honor their commitments. I think we'll understand each other perfectly." Matthew was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he looked at me with determination in his eyes. "Do you want me there?" "When it happens, I mean, for moral support." The offer moved me more than I could express. "No, Matthew. This is something I need to handle myself. But knowing you understand, that means everything." I reached across the desk and squeezed his shoulder. Tomorrow, I would make the call that put everything into motion. Tonight, I had the approval of the only family member whose opinion truly mattered. The elevator in the downtown office building whisked me to the 15th floor with smooth efficiency. I had spent the morning preparing for this meeting like any other crucial business negotiation. Research compiled, talking points organized, potential objections anticipated. The fact that this involved my own family made it more personal, but no less professional. The Reyes Investment Group occupied one half of the floor. Their reception area was decorated with an understated elegance that spoke of serious money and serious business. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes, had checked my ID carefully before announcing my arrival. "Mr. Reyes will see you now, Mr. Smith." Victor Reyes's office commanded a breathtaking view of the city lake. The man himself stood behind an executive desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. But his attention was completely focused on me, rather than trying to impress with his surroundings. "Mr. Smith," he offered a firm handshake. "I must admit, when you called yesterday asking to discuss Daniel Herrera, I was curious. Please have a seat." Reyes looked exactly as I had imagined. Late 40s, silvering temples, the kind of gravitas that comes from making tough decisions for a living. His suit was expensive, but not flashy. Everything about his office suggested competence and success. "Mr. Reyes, I'll be direct with you. My son-in-law owes you a substantial amount of money, and my family believes I should simply write a check to make their problems disappear." Reyes's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you disagree with that approach?" "I believe Daniel needs to learn responsibility, and my daughter needs to understand that she cannot manipulate people into solving problems she did not create." For the first time since I had entered his office, Reyes smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, but it conveyed approval. "Mr. Smith, in 20 years of private lending, I've dealt with dozens of family members. They usually want to know how little they can pay to make me go away. $250,000 is serious money. Your son-in-law knew the risks when he signed those papers." Reyes opened a file folder on his desk, scanning documents I recognized as Daniel's loan agreements. He certainly did. He signed multiple guarantees, personal liability clauses. He understood exactly what he was agreeing to. "What's your normal procedure when someone defaults? Documentation, demand letters, legal proceedings if necessary?" Reyes closed the folder and studied me carefully. "But Mr. Herrera has been creative in avoiding service of process." "Meaning?" "He moved from his registered address, changed his phone number. His business office is closed. Finding him to serve the papers has become time-consuming and expensive." I leaned forward slightly. "And if I told you I can save you that time and expense?" Reyes's expression sharpened with interest. "I'm listening." "I can tell you exactly where Daniel is hiding. His new address, his current phone number, even his daily routine." I paused, letting the value of that information settle. "In exchange, I want to be present when the papers are served." "Present how?" "I want him to understand that his actions have consequences. And I want my daughter to see what happens when you try to hide from your responsibilities instead of facing them." Reyes was silent for a long moment, considering my proposition. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Mr. Smith, that's the most interesting offer I've received in months. You are essentially volunteering to help me collect from your own family member." "I am volunteering to help teach my family about accountability." "And you believe this approach will be more effective than simply paying his debt?" "Mr. Reyes, if I pay this debt, Daniel learns that reckless decisions can be fixed with manipulation. My daughter learns that emotional blackmail works. What lesson does that teach my grandson? You do the math." Reyes's smile returned, this time with genuine warmth. "You are a man of principles, Mr. Smith. I respect that." He stood up and extended his hand again. "I accept your proposal. When can we proceed?" "December 29th at 4 o'clock. My daughter will be coming to my house to collect the money she is demanding. I suggest we provide her with a more educational experience instead." Reyes's handshake was firm and final. "Mr. Smith, I believe this partnership will be very productive." The coffee shop near the legal district buzzed with the quiet intensity of business professionals holding important conversations. Victor and I had chosen a table in the corner, away from the main flow of traffic, where we could discuss sensitive matters without being overheard. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across our documents and coffee cups. David Miller arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase that spoke of years of successful legal practice. Victor stood to greet his attorney, a man in his 50s with the sharp gaze and measured demeanor of someone who specialized in commercial debt collection. "David, this is Arthur Smith," Victor said, making the introduction. "Arthur, David Miller has been handling my legal affairs for over a decade. If there's a way to collect money legally in the state, David knows it." Miller shook my hand with professional courtesy. "Mr. Smith, Victor tells me you have information that could expedite our proceedings against Daniel Herrera." "I can tell you exactly where he will be tomorrow at 4 o'clock, I said without preamble. "Along with my daughter, who has been orchestrating this entire attempt to manipulate me into paying his debts." David opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder with legal documents. "We can file the lawsuit within 24 hours. The key is proper service of the papers. If Mr. Herrera continues to evade notification, we'll have to pursue more costly alternatives. He won't be evading anything tomorrow." I leaned forward, sharing the details I had withheld until now. "They are coming to my house at 4 o'clock. Daniel will be with her. She never lets him handle money matters alone. Too nervous about confrontation to trust him with something this important." Victor's expression showed approval. "Perfect. We can position my team nearby. Serve the papers right there." "What exactly does proper service require?" I asked Miller. "Physical delivery of documents to the defendant, verbal identification of the person being served, written verification of completion of service." Miller consulted his notes. "Given that we'll have clear identification and a controlled environment, there should be no procedural complications." Victor pulled out his phone, checking his calendar. "I can have 3 people there by 3:45, 1 to deliver the papers, 2 as witnesses and backup." "Tell me about Daniel's typical behavior," Miller requested. "Does he have any patterns we should anticipate?" I thought about my son-in-law's nervous habits, his tendency to fidget when stressed. "He'll pace. He won't stand still when he's anxious. He'll likely stick close to the door so he can leave quickly if things go wrong. He's fundamentally a coward." "That actually plays to our advantage," Miller noted. "Flight risk behavior supports our claims of urgency and need to pursue immediate attachment." Victor studied the papers in front of him. "I want him to understand the seriousness of this situation. Maybe seeing real consequences will teach him to think before taking other people's money." "What happens after service?" I asked. "He'll have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit," Miller explained. "During that time, we can pursue asset discovery, employment verification, all standard collection procedures. Given the amount involved and his attempts at evasion, we'll likely seek an expedited trial." The waitress refilled our coffee cups, providing a brief interruption to our planning. When she walked away, Victor leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. "Arthur, I have to say, this is the most cooperative family member I've encountered in a collection case." "I'm not thinking like a family member," I replied. "I'm thinking like a businessman who is tired of watching people avoid the consequences of their bad decisions." Miller made final notes in his file. "We'll have all the documentation ready by tomorrow morning. Service team briefed and positioned. Once the papers are delivered, Mr. Herrera will be officially in the legal system. And there's no way he can claim he wasn't properly served, not with 3 witnesses in a controlled environment." "Confirmed," Miller said. "This will be textbook proper service." Victor checked his watch. "I should coordinate with my team tonight. Arthur, are you comfortable with everything we've discussed?" I nodded, feeling the satisfaction that comes from a well-planned strategy. "Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, my daughter expects to collect $250,000. Instead, she will learn what happens when you try to solve problems with manipulation." As we gathered our papers and prepared to leave, I felt the same calm confidence I had experienced before major business negotiations. Every detail planned, every contingency considered, every person clear on their role. Tomorrow would be very educational for everyone involved. The morning light streamed through the windows of Thomas Green's law office as I signed the most significant legal document of my life. The notary, a severe woman in her late 60s named Patricia Gomez, watched intently as I affixed my signature to each page of the revised will. 40 years of building wealth, and it had taken less than an hour to restructure how it would be distributed. "Arthur, are you absolutely sure about these changes?" Thomas asked for the third time. "This is a fundamental alteration in your estate planning." I put down the pen and looked at the documents spread before me. Mary's inheritance, once substantial enough to ensure her comfortable retirement, now reduced to a symbolic $1,000. Matthew's portion drastically increased, along with significant donations to 3 city charities that taught financial responsibility to young adults. Absolutely sure. Someone who can blackmail her own father does not deserve to be rewarded for that behavior. Patricia stamped each page with official seals, her movements precise and professional. "The document is legally sound, Mr. Smith. Your wishes will be executed exactly as written, and the protective clauses will make any contest extremely difficult." Thomas gathered the signed pages, organizing them with practical efficiency. "What about the personal letter you wanted to include?" I handed him the sealed envelope I had prepared at home. Inside, 3 pages explained my reasoning to Mary, expressing both my love for her and my disappointment in her choices. The letter offered hope for reconciliation, but only if she demonstrated a genuine change in her character and behavior. Should this be stored with the original will? Yes. She needs to understand why these decisions were made, even if she disagrees with them. Patricia finished her notarial duties and began packing away her stamp and seals. "Mr. Smith, I've been notarizing estate documents for 25 years. I've never seen anyone make such significant changes without some kind of family crisis motivating them." "There has been a crisis," I acknowledged, "just not the kind most people would recognize." Thomas placed the completed documents in his office safe, the same secure location where my business contracts and other vital papers were stored. "Arthur, when do you plan to tell Mary about these changes?" "After the meeting tomorrow, once she understands that manipulation doesn't work. She'll need to decide what kind of person she wants to be going forward, and if she chooses to contest the will legally." I smiled, remembering the protective clauses Thomas had drawn up. "Then she will discover that trying to overturn a properly executed will is expensive, time-consuming, and rarely successful, especially when the testator was clearly of sound mind and had legitimate reasons for his decisions." Thomas locked the safe and turned back to me. "Your grandson is going to be a very wealthy young man someday. Matthew has character. He understands right from wrong, responsibility from entitlement. He will use the money wisely. Unlike his parents, he has learned that actions have consequences." "And what if Mary changes? What if this experience teaches her the lessons you hope she learns?" "Then the will can be changed again. But she will have to demonstrate that change through years of different behavior, not just words." As I prepared to leave, Thomas handed me a copy of the revised will for my files. The weight of the document felt symbolic, both the end of a relationship and the beginning of something more. "Arthur, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Enabling bad behavior never helps anyone, even when it's family." I shook his hand, grateful for his support and expertise. "Thank you, Thomas. Tomorrow we'll see if this approach yields the results I hope for." Walking toward my car, I felt the same sense of resolution that came after making tough but necessary business decisions. The will would remain a secret, until after tomorrow's confrontation. But knowing it existed gave me an added confidence in my approach. Mary would learn that manipulation had consequences that extended far beyond a single conversation. Some lessons, I reflected as I drove home, could only be taught through experience. The chessboard lay between Matthew and me on the coffee table. The pieces arranged in mid-game positions that required careful thought and planning. Outside, the city December evening had settled into the comfortable coolness that made indoor conversations feel especially intimate. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and consequences, but tonight offered the peaceful rhythm of strategic thought. "Your move, Grandpa." Matthew studied the board with intense concentration, trying to anticipate my next moves. I moved my bishop to threaten his knight, creating the kind of pressure that forced immediate decisions. In chess, Matthew, every move creates consequences that ripple forward. You can't just react to immediate threats. You have to consider what happens 3 or 4 moves down the line. Matthew captured my bishop with his rook, but I could see he was already regretting the exchange. "Like what you're doing with Mom and Dad?" Exactly like that. I moved my queen to a position that would create serious problems for his king in 2 moves. "Your father made decisions without considering the consequences. Your mother tried to manipulate me without thinking about how I might respond. Tomorrow, they will discover that actions always have results." My phone rang, interrupting our game. Victor Reyes' name flashed on the screen, right on time for our planned coordination call. "Victor, all set for tomorrow? Everything is in place. My people will be positioned near your home by 3:45. David has all the paperwork prepared and duly certified." Victor's voice conveyed professional satisfaction. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" "Confident. My daughter and son-in-law have no idea what's coming." Matthew listened quietly, understanding that he was witnessing the final preparations for something significant. His expression showed approval rather than concern, confirming my belief that he grasped the moral complexity of the situation. "And after the papers are served," Victor continued, "then we'll see how quickly they adjust to reality. Daniel will have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit, but I suspect his first call will be to me, begging for help. Which you will refuse. Which I will redirect toward personal responsibility. He created this mess. He needs to clean it up." After ending the call, I turned my attention back to Matthew and the chess game. He had used my distraction to slightly improve his position, showing the kind of strategic thinking that would serve him well in life. "Grandpa, what happens to our family after tomorrow?" I considered his question carefully, moving my knight to protect my queen while maintaining pressure on his position. "That depends entirely on how your parents respond to the consequences, Matthew. They can choose to learn from this experience and become better people, or they can choose to remain angry and entitled. And if they stay angry, then they will have chosen their path, just as I have chosen mine." I pointed to the chessboard. "You see how your knight is trapped now? You could sacrifice your queen to save it, or you could accept the loss and position yourself for a stronger endgame." Matthew studied the board, recognizing the parallel I was drawing. "You're choosing the stronger endgame. I'm choosing to teach lessons that should have been learned years ago." We played on in comfortable silence for several moves. The only sounds, the soft click of the chess pieces and the distant hum of night traffic. The house felt at peace, prepared for tomorrow's important visitors. I had cleaned thoroughly, arranged the furniture to ensure clear sight lines. I even selected my clothes for the occasion. "Matthew, regardless of what happens tomorrow or in the following weeks, I want you to remember something important." He looked up from contemplating his next move. "What is it?" True love sometimes requires making difficult decisions. Enabling someone's bad behavior is not helping them. It's hurting them and hurting everyone around them. How would giving Dad money hurt him? Exactly. It would teach him that irresponsibility can be fixed with manipulation. It would teach your mother that emotional blackmail works. And it would teach you that consequences don't apply to people you care about. Matthew nodded slowly, moving his queen to a defensive position. But this way, they might learn something. This way, they will have a chance to learn. Whether they take that chance or not is up to them. As the evening wore on, Matthew helped me put away the chess set and prepare for tomorrow's events. His presence had provided exactly the moral grounding I needed, confirming that my approach was sound and my reasoning clear. "I should head home," he said, gathering his jacket. "Good luck tomorrow, Grandpa." "It's not about luck, Matthew. It's about justice." After he left, I sat alone in my chair, looking at the clock that tomorrow would mark one of the most significant confrontations of my life. 4 o'clock would bring Mary and Daniel to my door, expecting money and compliance. Instead, they would find consequences and education. The house felt ready. My allies were prepared. My conscience was clear. Tomorrow would change everything, and I was completely at peace with that reality. 4 o'clock approached with the precision of a well-orchestrated business meeting. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same position I had occupied during the Christmas confrontation 4 days earlier. But now, everything felt different. The room held an electric anticipation that precedes momentous events, when months of planning converge on a single decisive moment. Through the front window, I could see Victor's dark sedan parked discreetly down the street. His team had positioned themselves exactly at 3:45 as planned, professional and invisible until needed. David Miller sat in the passenger seat, the legal documents prepared and certified, ready to execute the most important service of process in my recent memory. My phone vibrated with a text message from Victor. "Positioned." "Ready when you are," I replied simply. "They'll be here any minute." The sound of car doors closing in my driveway announced their arrival. Mary's confident stride on the pathway, Daniel's hesitant shuffle behind her, exactly as I had predicted to Victor. Some patterns never change, and my daughter's need to control situations while my son-in-law cowered in the background had become depressingly reliable. The doorbell rang. I counted to 5 before rising, allowing them to wait long enough to feel the weight of what they believed was their moment of victory. When I opened the door, Mary wore the triumphant smile of someone who thought she had successfully manipulated her father into submission. "Hi, Dad. I hope you've thought it through and realized that family is more important than principles." Her greeting carried the casual arrogance of someone expecting immediate capitulation. Daniel stood behind her, fidgeting with his car keys, unable to meet my eyes directly. The nervous energy radiating from him suggested that he understood, on some level, that this situation felt wrong. "I have thought it through very carefully," I replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "In fact, I have a surprise for both of you." They moved into the living room, Mary heading directly for the chair she had occupied during the Christmas dinner, Daniel hovering near the entrance as if plotting a quick escape. The very positioning I had described to Victor during our strategic planning session. "Dad, we don't need surprises." Mary settled into her chair with proprietary confidence. "We just need you to be reasonable about this situation. Daniel has made some mistakes, but family helps family." Daniel finally spoke, his voice carrying a desperate hope. "Mr. Smith, I know you're angry, but I promise I'll pay you back with interest. I just need time to... To what, Daniel?" I remained standing, maintaining the psychological advantage of height. To find another investor to fleece? To start another failed company with someone else's money? I told you, it wasn't a fleece. Daniel's voice cracked with desperation. The business model was solid. We just needed more runway to hit profitability. Mary shot her husband a warning glance. Then she turned back to me with renewed manipulation tactics. Dad, you are complicating this unnecessarily. It's $250,000. You spend more than that on advertising for the dealerships every year. The amount is not the issue, Mary. Then what is the issue? Why are you being so stubborn about helping your own family? Before I could answer, the sound of car doors closing outside drew everyone's attention. Daniel moved toward the window, then froze as he recognized the figures approaching my front door. No. His face went white. No, no, no. The doorbell rang again, this time with the authoritative persistence of someone conducting official business. Were you expecting someone else, Dad? Mary asked, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. I smiled, feeling the satisfaction that comes when a carefully orchestrated plan reaches its climax. Indeed I was. I told you I had a surprise. The doorbell rang a third time. Daniel pressed himself against the living room wall, shaking his head. Daniel Herrera. Victor Reyes' voice carried through the front door with professional clarity. I finally found you. I walked toward the front door with deliberate calmness as Daniel pressed himself against the living room wall like a cornered animal. Mary's confusion was evident as she looked between her terrified husband and my controlled demeanor. She was finally beginning to sense that something had gone terribly wrong with her carefully planned manipulation. Victor, please come in. I opened the door wide, allowing Victor Reyes and his associate to enter, official documentation visible in their hands. I believe you already know Daniel Herrera. Victor stepped into my living room with the measured confidence of a man conducting routine business. His gray suit and professional bearing created an immediate contrast to Daniel's obvious terror and Mary's escalating indignation. Mr. Herrera, you've been rather difficult to locate. Victor's voice conveyed no emotion, just the flat tone of someone completing a necessary task. I have legal documents that require your immediate attention. This is a trap. Daniel's voice cracked as he pointed a trembling finger at me. You set this up? How could you do this? Mary sprang from her chair, her face flushed with rage. You sold out your own daughter to this man. I didn't sell you out, Mary. I remained standing by the door, observing my family's reaction to the consequences they had never anticipated. I taught you that every action has results. Victor approached Daniel with the legal papers extended, his associate flanking to prevent any attempt at escape. Mr. Herrera, you owe me $250,000 plus accrued interest. This lawsuit is your official court summons. The investment was legitimate. Daniel's voice rose almost to hysteria. The AI startup had real potential. You can't sue me for taking a calculated business risk. I can sue you for defaulting on a loan with personal guarantees. Victor's tone remained professionally neutral, which you signed multiple times with full understanding of the terms. Mary whirled toward me, her former confidence completely shattered. Dad, how long have you been planning this? How long have you been lying to your own daughter? I haven't lied about anything. I moved toward my armchair, sitting down to observe the confrontation I had orchestrated. I promised to think about your demand. I thought about it very carefully. And you decided to betray your own family? I decided to stop enabling irresponsible behavior. My voice carried the authority I had used in tough business negotiations. Daniel borrowed money he couldn't repay. You tried to manipulate me into fixing his mistakes. You both need to learn that actions have consequences. Victor handed the legal documents to Daniel. who took them with trembling hands. "You have 30 days to respond to this lawsuit, Mr. Herrera. I suggest you seek competent legal representation." "This is all wrong." Daniel clutched the papers as if they might bite him. "Mr. Smith, you said you would think about helping. You said you understood family obligations." "I do understand obligations, Daniel. Your obligation to repay the money you borrowed. Your obligation to face the consequences of your bad decisions instead of hiding behind your wife. Now you get to prove your business model was solid in court," I continued, as a responsible adult facing the results of his choices. Mary's fury peaked as she realized the full extent of what had happened. "You planned this whole thing. You knew exactly what you were going to do when we left here on Christmas night." "I knew I wasn't going to reward manipulation with money. Everything else unfolded from that principle." Victor checked his watch with professional efficiency. "Mr. Herrera, Ms. Herrera, my business here is concluded. The legal process will proceed according to state law." "What happens now?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "Now you face the consequences of your decisions," I answered before Victor could reply. "You borrowed money from a legitimate investor. You failed to repay it as agreed. You tried to hide from your obligations. The legal system will determine what happens next." Victor moved toward the door, followed by his associate. "Mr. Smith, thank you for your cooperation in this matter." "Thank you for being reasonable about the collection process, Victor." As the door closed behind them, Mary and Daniel stood in my living room like survivors of a natural disaster. The confident daughter who had arrived expecting easy money was gone, replaced by someone who was beginning to understand that her manipulation tactics had catastrophic limitations. "Dad," Mary's voice carried a note I had never heard before. Not anger, not entitlement, but something approaching acknowledgement. "Yes? What happens to us now?" I looked at my daughter and son-in-law, seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. "That depends entirely on what you choose to learn from this experience." The spring sunlight streamed through the windows of our regular downtown coffee shop as Matthew and I settled into our usual corner table. Our weekly coffee meetings had become a cherished routine since the December confrontation, providing space for the kind of conversations that help young men understand complex adult realities. "Grandpa, how are things with Mom and Dad now?" Matthew stirred his coffee with the thoughtful precision he had inherited from his grandfather's side of the family. "Better than I expected, honestly." I smiled, thinking of the gradual thaw that had occurred over the past few months. "Daniel is paying the debt back in installments." Victor turned out to be more reasonable than anyone imagined. The legal proceedings had unfolded exactly as David Miller predicted. Daniel had hired a competent attorney who quickly advised him that fighting the lawsuit would be costly and futile. Victor, demonstrating the fairness that had built his business reputation, offered a structured repayment plan that allowed Daniel to avoid bankruptcy while taking full responsibility for his obligations. Dad is working now. He found a position at a software consulting firm. Nothing glamorous, but stable income with growth potential. I took a sip of my coffee, reflecting on how quickly Daniel had adapted to accountability once he stopped looking for escape routes. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they stop expecting others to fix their problems. "And Mom?" That question carried more complexity. Mary is still angry, but she called for the first time yesterday. Maybe she's finally starting to understand. The phone call had been brief and awkward, but it represented the first crack in the wall of resentment she had built since December. No apology yet, no acknowledgement of her manipulation tactics, but a tentative inquiry about my health that suggested some recognitions of the relational damage that needed repair. "Will you forgive her?" Matthew asked with the directness that made these conversations so valuable. Forgiveness is not forgetting, Matthew. It's the chance to start over when someone truly understands their mistakes. I held his gaze across the table. Your mother needs to demonstrate that she's learned something before we can rebuild trust. What about the will? Will you change it again? I had told Matthew about the inheritance modifications the week after the confrontation, feeling he deserved to understand the full scope of what had happened. His reaction had been mature, beyond his years, concern for family healing rather than excitement about his financial future. If your mother shows genuine change over time, yes. But it will require more than apologies. It will require years of different behavior. Matthew nodded thoughtfully, like Dad actually having to pay the money back instead of just promising to. Exactly like that. Actions matter more than words. The coffee shop buzzed with the lunch crowd. Business professionals, college students, families enjoying the pleasant April weather. The spring energy of the city felt hopeful, reflecting the gradual improvements in my family's situation. Grandpa, do you think what you did was right? Looking back, I mean. I considered his question carefully, appreciating his willingness to engage with the moral complexity. I believe enabling bad behavior would have been wrong. Teaching consequences was difficult, but necessary. Even though it hurt them, sometimes the people we love the most need to experience the results of their choices, not as punishment, but as education. I reached across the table to squeeze his shoulder. Your parents are better people today because they faced reality instead of being rescued from it. Matthew was silent for several minutes, processing the life lessons embedded in our family's recent history. Finally, he looked up with understanding in his eyes. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That's what integrity means, Matthew. Doing the right thing, no matter the cost. As we prepared to leave, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from seeing principles validated by results. Daniel was employed and making payments. Mary was beginning to question her behavior. Matthew had witnessed the importance of accountability and personal responsibility. The confrontation in December had been painful, but necessary. 4 months later, the family wounds were beginning to heal. Not through permissiveness or forgetting, but through the honest work of acknowledging mistakes and building better relationships. Same time next week? Matthew asked as we stood up to leave. Wouldn't miss it. These conversations are the best part of my week. Walking toward our cars, I reflected on the difference between the love that enables and the love that teaches. The second kind requires more courage, but it builds stronger people and healthier relationships. 4 months ago, I had made the hardest decision of my life as a father. Today, seeing Matthew grow into a man of character, while his parents slowly learned to take responsibility for their choices, I knew it had been the right choice. Justice, I discovered, often looks exactly like love, when you are brave enough to let it be. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions about this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.